Michael, yeah, come to. Switch and come up from my side. I dey try make am clear. Switch and come up from my side. If you hear me, switch and come up. Michael, come make you come to it.
the Vice Chancellor's procession. The Vice Chancellor's procession, directors of academic programs, directors of institutes, directors of academic units, deans of faculties, the dean of students, the provost, College of Medical Sciences, the provost, College of Postgraduate Studies, the inaugural lecturer and principal officers of the university, the Vice Chancellor's procession. Standing to take the first two stanzas of the national anthem, followed by the Uniben anthem. mission-driven Vice-Chancellor in Learned Silk, Professor Odoba Omoyege, Senior Advocate of Nigeria, represented by the Deputy Vice-Chancellor Academic, Professor Chief Victor Igbeneweka. Please put your hands together. Your Excellencies, top government functionaries, the Royal Highnesses, other principal officers of our great university, the provosts, deans, directors, the inaugural lecturer, the family of the inaugural lecturer, professors emeriti, other esteemed scholars here present, all the senior citizens in forestry and wildlife here present, my Lord spiritual, greatest UNIBEN staff and students, invited guests, gentlemen of the press, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. Today, the inaugural lecture baton moves for now from the Vice-Chancellor's home faculty, the Faculty of Law, to their next-door neighbor, the Faculty of Agriculture. And it is my singular privilege to welcome you all to the 352nd inaugural lecture of our great university. Clap if you want to clap. Clap for UNIBEN. We are doing well. We are doing great. Thank you. The lecture is to be delivered by one of the best in his field, a professor of forest conservation and rehabilitation ecology. Professor EKEOBA ISIKHUEMEN. The topic of his lecture is our rainforest of inestimable biodiversity is degraded, endangered, my experiential salvage prescriptions. May I now invite the Registrar of the University, ably represented by the Deputy Registrar, Senate Matters, Mrs. Comfort Ehigiato, to formally introduce the Vice-Chancellor and the Vice-Chancellor's procession. Vice-Chancellor, sir.
I welcome you all to the 352nd inaugural lecture in the series of this great university. The Registrar of the University of Benin, Mr. Ademola Obubola, is away, and he has requested that I represent him. He sends his greetings to you all. I am Comfort Nyebulena Ehigiato, Deputy Registrar, Senate Matters. Permit me to sound on the already established protocol by the Public Relations Officer of this university, Dr. Mrs. Benedita Heanere, and to introduce the Vice-Chancellor's procession. Today's procession is led by a determined, transformational, focused, and energetic Vice-Chancellor. I therefore crave your indulgence to present to this great audience our own learned Vice-Chancellor, Professor Odoba Omoyege, who is represented here by Professor V.O. Igbeneweka, Deputy Vice-Chancellor Academic. Other principal officers, provosts, deans, and directors in the procession are as follows. Professor C.C. Osumbo, Deputy Vice-Chancellor, Administration. The Bursar, Mr. O.I. Osifo. The University Librarian, Professor Mrs. Jane Abba. Provost College of Postgraduate Studies, Professor D.N. Izeko. The host Dean, Faculty of Agric, Professor C.O. Emokaro. Dean, Faculty of Arts, Professor O.B. Osadolo. Dean, School of Basic Medical Sciences is represented by Dr. Sage Idemudia. Dean, Faculty of Education, Professor K.O. Omorogiwa. Dean, Faculty of Law, Professor Bright Bazwaye. Dean, Faculty of Life Sciences is represented by Professor Cyprian Otioma. Dean, School of Medicine is represented by Dr. A.I. Obi. Protein Dean, Faculty of Optometry is represented by Dr. K.N. Bazwaye. The Dean, Faculty of Physical Sciences is represented by Professor Julian Bebo. Director, Center for Gender Studies, Director, Center for Gender Studies, Professor Mrs. Lucy A. Okupo. Director, Center for Entrepreneurship Development, Professor B.O. Edegba. Director, Intellectual Property and Technology Transfer is represented by Dr. Mrs. I.B. Idemudia. Director, JUPEP, Professor K.O. Elewari. Director, Advanced Digital Engineering Center, ADEC, Professor R.O.S. Eboyaye. Directorate of Research, Innovation and Development, Professor Mrs. N.F. Inuigbe. Director, Step B, Professor Mrs. N. Kayode Ojo. Director, Center for Maritime and ICT, Dr. F.O. Uworie. Director, Center for Educational Technology, Dr. Mrs. M.B. Arawa. Director, AFRIMA, African Institutes of Management and Leadership, Professor D.E. Omorogbe. Leading the Vice Chancellor's procession today is Mrs. Modupe Obayago, Senior Assistant Registrar, Senate Matters. I now have the honor and privilege to invite our dear Vice Chancellor to introduce the inaugural lecturer for today. Vice Chancellor, sir.
Dear Senate Matters, thank you very much. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Our dear Vice Chancellor, Professor Edoba Brighton Meridi, SAN, is not physically present because he has other official engagements. He has asked me to represent him in this inaugural lecture today. It is therefore my privilege to read the address by the Vice Chancellor on the occasion of the 352nd inaugural lecture series of the University of Benin, delivered today, Thursday, 18th September 2025. Principal officers of the university, the Provost, College of Postgraduate Studies, Provost, College of Medical Sciences, the deans of faculties and schools, directors of institutes and centers, members of council here present, professors emeriti and members of Senate here present, my Lord, spiritual and temporal, staff and great students of the University of Benin, distinguished invited guests and friends of the university, gentlemen of the press, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. It is with immense delight that I welcome you all to the 352nd inaugural lecture series of the University of Benin. Today's lecture is the third to be delivered in the Department of Forest Resources and Wildlife Management. The 15th in the Faculty of Agriculture. And by the grace of God, the 23rd to be delivered in my tenure as Vice Chancellor, University of Benin. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to introduce our lecturer for today. He is Professor EKEOBA ISIKHUEMEN. The title of his lecture is Our Rainforest of Inestimable Biodiversity is Degraded, Endangered, My Experiential Salvage Prescriptions. Professor EKEOBA ISIKHUEMEN was born June 24th, 1957, to the family of late Christopher ISIKHUEMEN and Mrs. Aribwa Justina ISIKHUEMEN of Udakpa, Ubiaja, Eastern Southeast Local Government Area of Edo State. He had his primary school education at local authority primary school, Udakpa, to obtain his first school leaving certificate in 1969. He attended St. John Bosco's College, now Ubiaja Grammar School, Ubiaja, where he obtained the West African School certificate in 1976. Professor ISIKHUEMEN early career commenced with the Edo State Civil Service in 1979 as an assistant forest superintendent in training, and it was during this period he obtained a diploma in forestry from the Federal School of Forestry, Jos, in 1982. He thereafter served as the assistant forest superintendent, and he was promoted to the position of forest superintendent in 1989 before the Benin state government granted him study leave with pay to pursue his bachelor degree in 1990. Professor ISIKHUEMEN gained admission into the University of Benin, where he obtained the Bachelor of Agriculture, Forestry and Wildlife with second-class honors upper division in 1995. After his first degree, Professor ISIKHUEMEN was promoted to Forest Officer 2 in the Edo State Ministry of Agriculture and Natural Resources in 1995, and he rose through the ranks to the position of Acting General Manager, Edo State Environmental Consults and Laboratory from 2009 to 2010. In order to broaden his knowledge, Professor ISIKHUEMEN obtained the following additional degrees through study leave with pay from Edo State Government. MSc in Environmental Conservation in 1998, Master of Business Administration MBA in 2006, both from the University of Benin, and PhD in Forest Conservation and Ecology in the year 2005 from the University of Agriculture, Abeokuta, Ogun State. Professor ISIKHUEMEN joined the services of the University of Benin in 2011 as a lecturer 1 in the Department of Forest Resources and Wildlife Management, and rose through the ranks to the position of a professor in 2020. He has held some notable administrative positions within and outside the university, such as Counterpart Project Manager / Biodiversity Officer, SPDC, NC Edo State, BAR Project 2007 to 2009, Member, Faculty of Agriculture Disciplinary Committee on Examination Malpractice 2014 to 2016, Chairman, University of Benin Tree Planting Committee, Ubo Campus 2016 to 2017, Acting Head of Department of Forestry and Wildlife Management, University of Benin 2019 to 2020, 2020 to 2021. Professor ISIKHUEMEN belongs to several professional bodies and associations, such as Forestry Association of Nigeria, Edo State Branch, Nigerian Field Society, Edo State Branch, Commonwealth Forestry Association, International Society of Tropical Foresters, Society for Ecological Restoration. Professor ISIKHUEMEN was the best graduating student in silviculture, Federal School of Forestry, Jos in 1982. The best graduating student in theory level, Department of Forestry and Wildlife, University of Benin, 1992/1993 session. He is the first Nigerian professor. He is the first Nigeria's professor of forest conservation and rehabilitation ecology. He is the first PhD holder in forest conservation and ecology in Nigeria. Professor ISIKHUEMEN supervised the first Nigeria's PhD holder in forest ecology and rehabilitation. In addition to supervising over 12 master's degree students and several undergraduate students. Professor ISIKHUEMEN has over 45 publications in books, journals, and conference proceedings. He has attended several local, national, and international conferences. Professor ISIKHUEMEN has been rendering consultancy services since 2004 to local and national companies such as Press School Oil, NIFO, UBTH, Dancer Foods Limited, among several others. Professor ISIKHUEMEN is a reviewer to so many international and local peer-reviewed journals. He is a devout Christian and is married to Mrs. Philo ISIKHUEMEN, and the marriage is blessed with 4 children. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to invite Professor EKEOBA ISIKHUEMEN to deliver his lecture.
Vice Chancellor, sir, Professor Edward Bright, Omorege SAN, Mr. Vice Chancellor, sir, on account of time, I'll plead to be allowed to continue with my lectures. Thank you very much, sir. This lecture is dedicated to my late father and late mother. I express my eternal gratitude for the undiluted love, untiring benevolence, and extraordinary sacrifice in shaping my childhood. Without you, I doubt if I would have been able to rise above the mundane absurdities that characterize the early childhood of most males, particularly in the setting where I was nurtured, and to ultimately become the heroic grassroots conservation and rehabilitation ecologist I have craved for from infancy. Preamble. With joy in my heart and fulfillment of a lifelong yearning, I'm exceptionally grateful to the Vice Chancellor, Professor Omorege SAN, for the rare opportunity accorded me to present this piece containing my close to half a century hands-on adventures in the forest. However, it would have been practically impossible if the Almighty God was not always by my side to provide a seamless time of passage for me to accomplish this great feat within this short but momentous period of my pursuit in and outside academics. This lecture titled Our Rainforest of Inestimable Biodiversity is Degraded, Endangered, My Experiential Salvage Prescriptions is the 15th from the Faculty of Agriculture and 3rd from the Department of Forest Resources and Wildlife Management. This one, my lecture is divided into 4: introduction. I stand tall before this admirable audience to reinvigorate my lifelong attachment to the forest and the natural world. It is indeed providential. So choosing my career path was not by accident, and I was not coerced. It arose from a genuine, flawless lure to nature, orchestrated by the enigma. The puzzle was that as a little kid, I saw animals move, but I didn't see plants move. And the plants are fit to the soil with lush greenery and adorable scenery when viewed from a distance. The photograph there, I will not take time to read everything. In 1964, my father hired 7 axemen to fell Salicodiscus gabonensis, the largest in my village. Salicodiscus is called Okan in Benin and Ekan in Nation. And it took these fellas 13 good days to bring down this tree. So the young boy you see there is me in 1964. And my dad, by me, wearing a hat. So section B, the tropical rainforest at a glance. Skimper, a German, in 1903 coined the word or the title tropical rainforest from the term tropisch regivad, meaning forests of the permanent wet tropics. He defined the rainforest as evergreen hygrophilous, nice water-loving character, at least 30 meters high, rich in thick stem lianas, and in woody as well as herbaceous epiphytes. In Africa, it's concentrated around the Congo and a little strip down the West Africa region. The characteristics of rainforest, you have the trees, you have the climbers, epiphytes. The undergrowth includes seedlings, saplings, and young trees. Within the forest, again, you have 2 divisions. You have the evergreen and the dry and the deciduous species. Then with regards to the fruiting characteristics, we have the cauliflory, those are the trees that bear fruits on their main stems, and of course the ramiflory, the trees that bear fruit on the branches. Again, there's further division of the trees into gibes, we have the pioneers, the climber species, and of course, in between them you have the non-pioneer like Jumandes. Roles of the rainforest. The rainforest provides food, fresh water, and regulates air, water quality, then sequesters carbon. It supports soil formation and fertility, and culturally supports spiritual and religious, again, gives spiritual and religious values unto man. Then we come to Nigeria, the rainforest and associated biodiversity. I will not take your time. I'll quickly run through some of these. Nigeria hosts 4,640 plant species, out of which 205 are endemic. Endemic means they are native to the country. Then the mammalians, above 250 species, have dwell in the forest, including elephant, gorillas, chimpanzees, hippopotamus. All of these are endangered. Now, Edo State at a glance. The forest of Edo State today is under Forestry Commission. There are 40 forest reserves, which covers 574,944 hectares. In the south, Edo South, we have 15 forest reserves, translating to 79.44%. Edo Central, I have 17, translating to 6.52%, and Edo North, 8, equivalent 14.04%. The challenges that Edo State forestry face include underfunding, poor dearth of staff and poor equipped staff, multiple toll system, encroachment, and other fires. Now section C includes my work both within and outside the forest. So sometime in 2012, I was given a fellowship by the United Nations University Institute for Natural Resources in Africa. And there my assignment was to look at the past management system, particularly by the colonial administration. So in that work, I pick out some of the findings. The pit soil preceded forest exploitation and reservation phase. And the first pit soil station was established in the Lagos colony in 1782. The photograph you're seeing there is those who were sowing in pit in the 20s, in the 40s, and up to the 60s. The technique is just simple. They dig a pit the size of the log, place trestle are just crossbars on the pit. Two men are engaged, one on the top of the log and the other one inside the pit. And what do? In seesaw fashion, they drag the saw up and down. And sometimes take up to a month or more than a month to convert a log into useful value. So I went from there to look at forest exploitation by the colonial administration. Colonial exploitation of forests began long before 1900. The forest proclamation, the management system by the colonialists were essentially through proclamations and ordinances. That of 1991 signals the birth of forest administration in southern Nigeria. The order number 8, forest ordinance, put all economic trees outside forest reserve under government control. And the 1916 ordinance mandated loggers to plant 24 young trees for each one that is harvested. And the ordinance of 1927 authorized native administration to constitute forest reserves. The first two forest reserves in Nigeria were Mago and Olukemeji, which were created in 1899 and 1901. The 58 there, you see the dotted darker green, the forest reserve in Nigeria. Then we look at forest regeneration experiment. Two foresters, in fact, they were the first foresters to come to Nigeria to be involved in forest administration. Of course, they concentrated on experimentation. They did several experiments in several forest reserves and several other forest reserves. But notable among them is the relic of the relics of the plantation which was established after the colonialists had exited Nigeria to establish Atubu on 20-hectare plot in 1967. But the beauty of the study we did was that when we investigated, we found that the plantation consisted of a little above 300 tree species, but other species that came into the plantation, which were even larger than the Black Afara trees, were numbered over 1,000. Meaning the forest has been meaning the forest, which was plantation, now became a mixed forest. Then the colonialists did funny things when they were in Nigeria. Their policies were designed to favor European firms, while the local timber contractors, which are referred to as concessionaires, only had access to peat soil and low-value processing with axes. The photograph you see there, the one on the left, is taken in Nigeria. The fellas climbed scaffold, and this tree will take more than 13 days, which the one I really took. You know, the right, you see the fellas as far back as the early 40s, these photographs were taken. The second one from Australia, they were not using axe, but they were using saws to fell their trees. Then came the tropical shelterwood system. It's a system that was meant to regenerate the forest, wherein two classes of species, class 1 and 2. There were 4 classes in fact. Classes 1 and 2 were the desirable species, where 3 and 4 were not desirable. The photograph you see there is somebody that was applying a herbicide, chemical they used those days in the 40s to kill the wood that were not desirable. You could imagine in 1944, 23 trees were accepted as desirable and all other trees were killed. That was the damage done by the TSS. Then beyond the TSS, after independence, we had other issues. Forest concessions were reduced from 100 years to 50 years. That's after 1960. And in 1967, during the war, both the West and Midwest regional government annulled the TSS in principle, but in practice, it was still being practiced. From 1980, forest exploitation became regulated. In Benin State, particularly, forest re-entry or rotation was reduced from 25 years to 5 years in 1994, and further to 3 years in 1997. What was the aim of all these things? The intention was just to generate revenue, and that's all. In other clients like Ghana, the return period for exploitation 40 years. In Liberia, it was 25 years. Then they start there's the current national and state laws. The 36 states in Nigeria, they have disparate standalone forest policies and law. Then about the federal government, the Federal Ministry of Environment plays a minibus role, superintending over several agencies, the climate change, desertification, forestry, ozone depletion, all these as agencies under the Federal Ministry of Environment. And the National Environment Standards and Regulation Enforcement Agency, NESRA, enforces compliance with national environmental laws and international agreements, protocols and conventions, as well as treaties on the environment. But sadly, the states with constitutional prerogative of managing forests and allied resources within their domains, till today do not feel the impact of NESRA. Nigeria is the only country on land out of 54 sub-Saharan African countries without a national law. Blazer et al. 2011, Signal 2014. And unfortunately, the photograph you're seeing was taken, the first one on the left is, we have raft of loads. We counted for over 1,000 placed on the river and route to Lagos from Okumu National Park. In National Park, losing this number of loads, you could imagine where we find ourselves. And the worst here, the photograph on the right is a hippopotamus that was killed last month. It's an endangered species in other climes, I'm sure. The countries will not kill, but we have laws, international conventions. Every year, Nigeria, the head of government and most people at Abuja will go to the COP, is Conference of Parties in several countries. But they come back and fall back on what we're supposed to do as a country. So, I did several studies in several forest reserves at Abaho, at Ologbo, Gili, Oronibo Forest Reserve. Several studies I did, and the results are there in the book. I also went to look at the seeds of tropical rainforest trees as well as the germination of the seedlings. What is a seedling? I will not bore you because I have several things to present. The natural regeneration. The beauty of this study, I did this in several reserves. In the 50-year-old Black Afara plantation, which I mentioned earlier, we found zero regeneration under the forest, zero regeneration of Terminella arborescens, that is Black Afara. That one simply confirms that Black Afara does not regenerate easily, meaning the young seedlings cannot survive under the canopy of Black Afara. Then several studies I did again outside the forest. In our nursery at the University of Benin here, several species were tried. We look at the regeneration, look at the seed germination of most of these trees. Then condemnation, we did trial, particularly on Pentadesma, which is a climate species. It grows under shade of other trees. Then come restoration, rehabilitation, and reclamation. If you are restoring an ecosystem, the thing you're supposed to do, or you're supposed to carry out, is that you are not going to bring the ecosystem back to where it was before. But restoration only tells us that you bring back ecological services. And whereas rehabilitation is the best word to use when you want to restore a forest. Then conservation, defined by IUCN 1980 as the management of human use of the biosphere so that it may yield the greatest sustainable benefit to present generation while maintaining its potential to meet the needs and aspirations of future generations. Conservation is defined as the plan, protection, maintenance, management, sustainable use, and restoration of natural resources and the environment in order to secure their long-term survival. Again, we define biodiversity here, endangered and degraded forests. I'm defining this because they are all part of the title of this work. Biodiversity is solely about the number, the variation, and variability. Whereas the endangered species, endangered is used to refer to a species of plant or animal seriously at risk of extinction in the near future, either worldwide or in a particular political jurisdiction. And the great forest, former forest lands severely damaged by the excessive harvesting of wood and all non-timber forest products, poor management, repeated fire, grazing or other disturbances or land uses that damage soil and vegetation to a degree that inhibits or severely delays the re-establishment of forests after abandonment. My work went beyond just regeneration. We went into going to look at medicinal plant. Our interest here is not necessarily whether it has efficacy. My interest is to bring the medicinal plant from the natural ecosystem to habitat to our homes, to our home gardens, so that we can somehow be able to domesticate some of these plants. So we have successes recorded in doing that. I've regenerated ex-situ, that is outside its natural environment. I've characterized some rainforest flora used as food and medicines. Piper, there are two Piper guinensis, which is Ziza, and Piper undulatum. Two Benin call it Ebeweria. We have a rock on Tamarcapus Daniela, Avinja gabonensis, and Avinja blue, that is the bitter and sweet ogbono. I also worked on Garcinia cola, bitter cola. I think the greatest of the work is on the Kubaka of Rebili. That is the dead tree. Yeah, this photograph you see were photograph I took from the plants that I took out from the forest and which I worked on. Yeah, I will not bore you to look at their efficacy in the use for cure of medicines, but let's move to the next slide. The next slide. The major high point of the work we did on Piper guinensis and Piper undulatum was I tried to look at published work by authors, and then beyond that I went to the field to look at how the local people use these plants. And the aromatic ring that you see there, the blue line represents that of the Piper undulatum, and that plant can be useful for stomach disorder and several other diseases or ailments. But the Piper guinensis, which is Osiza, does not cure or prevent pie or diarrhea. Then we look at the Tamarcapus, which is the wrapping leaf. Our study here was quite interesting. It has the economic, ecological, and medicinal potentials and acts as safety net for the rural poor during lean and off-season periods. Now, in Nigeria, we use this plant just for wrapping, but elsewhere, particularly in Ghana, they've gone beyond the use of plant for wrapping. It contains taumantin, that is from the seed, or an iron that is attached to the seed. Taumantin is over 3,000 times sweeter than table sugar. And if you test this array, in 3 hours, the malt will still be sweet. That is Tamarcapus. The first photograph is the grove in the forest. And the last photograph is the fruit. It fruits at the ground level, and the seed carries an array at the top, and that array is the one, like I said, that is a sweetener. Then we went beyond that to look at mistutu. From nauseous weed to cure all medicine, mistutu is used by several people these days to cure several ailments. We look at the species ecology, host biodiversity, and several other works were done on mistutu. Now, the high point of that work was that the mistutu is gotten from sponges, for example. It's useful for it's an anti-malaria, antibacterial and viral, anti-epileptic, anti-psychotic. But our warning here is that those who use mistutu as medicine should exercise caution, and there is need to do more studies on the efficacy as well as the toxicity. That is the mistutu that was being harvested. Now, the high point of our work was Kubaka of Rebili African juju tree. The name of Kubaka is derived from Ayi language called Devon, and it means dead tree. It recognizes as killer of nearby trees, it is mystical, it is highly revered for treatment of strange ailment. So Hardy 1963 tells a story that the Edo tradition in Nigeria forbids the use of matches, that is cutlass, to obtain the tree bark, preferring to use wooden batting instead. But beyond that, what we found out is that the males don't get close to, females don't get close to this wonderful plant, but the males can harvest the bark with batting, but there's a caveat. For a male to harvest the bark, the male needs to get some 20 or over meters away from the tree, get stripped of his clothes, and run out of the tree while in nude state, grab the tree, and then tells the tree, I have come for protection. So before that, what the whoever wants to harvest does is to offer habitual items like cowries, white chalk, cola nuts, piece of white cloth, money. So he harvests and then goes. This point here is 15 naira note that I found under a coconut tree when we went to investigate. This picture was only taken last month. We went to the forest and found this tree. And this one, which is half dead, because of the over-scarring. Scarring means people don't use batting again, but they use cutlasses to scar this tree. And when you scar, the tendency is for the tree to die. Now, another beautiful discovery. The plants within there is a consociation, a large collection of Miratus arboreus. Initially, they call it Yega, Benin call it Yega too. If you get into a forest, what you find, once you find a large collection of this plant, there's a kupaka there. We had an experience just 3 weeks ago. We went to a forest and I saw a large collection of this plant. Before that, some young guys that followed, I told them, go and look for kubaka in this place. I think they doubted me. Incidentally, they are here. So I moved forward and found a kubaka tree. So it's an identifier. If you're in the forest, you see a large collection of Miratus arboreus, there is a kubaka there. So our work went beyond studying of trees. Before I joined UNIBEN, I started work on degraded forest, rainforest, restoration and rehabilitation of timber species. I had a plot at Ugo, established in 2005. Planted introduced some rainforest species alongside cassava. And by the 5th year, the forest had gone from grassland to secondary growth forest. This is grassland, and by 2009, that's the forest. Then again, when I was in SPDC, I about the project, which was a project designated to conserve biodiversity and enhance livelihood of 37 communities. And the midterm results show that the project was working right. And the interim result we presented at the International Union Forest Organization conference in Ghana. And it was published in 2008 also. Then urban forestry greening with indigenous trees. I joined UNIBEN in 2011. The same year, when the department was about celebrating the World Environment Day, I went to the ministry, took a letter to the ministries, the Commissioner for Environment, Mr. ISIKHUEMEN, and I told him, I had raised 60,000 seedlings last year, 2010. Please, could you give me just 2,000? He offered me without sitting, just said, okay, we are good to go. I took 2,000 seedlings. So UNIBEN, we started World Environment in 2011. 2012 and 2013. In 2014, we took whatever environment did to a local village along Abraka Road called EKEOBA, and Forest Organization assisted us with 2,000 seedlings, and in 2015-2016, we came back to UBTH and then added UBTH. The work in UBTH has been published by a student whom I gave the assignment to carry out investigation on the trees we planted. That is Rabo Ito 2020. Beyond 2015-16, in 2017, we took what the environment did to Usain Polytechnic, where we planted 1,000 seedlings. And in 2018, we came back to the Faculty of Education. They sought for some seedlings and I offered them some seedlings. And what did they get? Well, if you go to Faculty of Education now, the car park is a beautiful place to behold. In 2021, we went back. In 2021, we went to commemorate World Environment Day. We did it here in Uniben and then went to NIFO the same day. Before that, we are seeing, we're taking 2011 to 2030, and the trees that you see there, particularly the one at the center, is ripe enough for harvest. Then the rehabilitation work, again, we looked at some rainforest flora, particularly Taumatococos daniela. There was this collaboration between Uniben and Raw Materials Research Council, based in Abuja, and I was made a facilitator. Uniben gave me 1 hectare in Site B. We cleared the 1 hectare, planted trees, planted seedlings, and in 3 years, we did not only succeed in restoring the forest, we succeeded in producing 2 postgraduate or undergraduate from the site. So that is the site in 2021. It was virtually grassland, and by 2024, we have both our trees and the Taumatococos luxuriant growth. I have ongoing research on Okubaka of Benin. The research was just to find out why does it kill some trees and leave others. But there are some trees like Mirantus, Venona, and of course Celtis. They grow luxuriantly around Okubaka, but all other trees are killed. That is the ongoing research we are doing. Recommendation: it's time to stop the lamentations and blame game. Other nations within Africa and other regions of the world that were colonized like Nigeria have since moved on. You see, I'm basing this on what we have seen during the past 2 weeks. We continue to blame the colonialists. But when they left before 60, they didn't bring the forest down. We have decided to bring our forest down. Mr. John Dock Lin, neither rich nor highly educated, with the support of labor, local labor, he personally mobilized, planted 2.53 million trees on 5,649 hectares of land in South Korea from 1956 to 1976. Japan colonized South Korea. And let's come to Africa. Professor Wangari Maathai received the Nobel laureate in 2004. Beyond that, she also mobilized using her Green Belt movement and started planting trees in his country, Kenya. And Kenya again was colonized like Nigeria by the UK. So my recommendation proper are these. Federal and state government should establish institutions and develop policies and programs that gender incentivized participatory research in basic indigenous ecological and empirical knowledge so as to avoid the rainforest's ultimate disappearance. We take a cue from Saro 1992. He said the best time to plant a forest, to restore a forest is when it's still available. Nigeria's extant governance system inspires the community, and in terms of the application of the country's national forest policy, and states enabling statutes. The 36 state government operates standalone and contrasting forest policies and law. To this end, Nigeria must, as a matter of urgency, establish people and environment-friendly national forest law and inspire states to follow suit, even if it means rejigging the nation's constitution. Concerted efforts should be made by all tiers of government to mobilize all stakeholders to adapt and imbibe the result-oriented landscape restoration and species rehabilitation approaches, both the ones that we have used right in UNIBEN and outside UNIBEN, and the ones that are being used within different climes. In serious circumstances, the capture and release technique, which involves rescuing species with declining populations and then nurturing them ex situ, that is in captivity, before introducing them back to the wild or natural habitat, should be institutionalized. It has become imperative for institutes, including universities, to build bridges that harness empirical and indigenous ecological knowledge of flora and fauna so as to minimize the suspicion and information gaps that exist among scientists and custodians of indigenous ecological knowledge. A trustworthy collaborative alliance will foster the integration of resident ecological and empirical knowledge on medicinal plant research and therapeutic is apt. The outcomes of our investigation of greening urban and peri-urban environment with wide rainforest trees are worthy testament that these species can be used to prevent or mitigate environmental hazards, particularly climate-related crises. However, the blanket use of wide rainforest trees for greening, living, build-up areas and improving the environmental health should be carried out with caution, and perhaps under the close supervision of rehabilitation ecologists. The reason is simple. Such intervention require a good knowledge of the species' ecological peculiarities. What are the peculiarities? They include what group does the species belong, and what temperament does it have, what is the group pattern, what is the root and crown architecture, and what is the bole height and the tensile strength. If you use any species for urban greening, then you are predisposing the people that live, the houses that are around there, to danger. Finally, UNIBEN is currently properly positioned to lead other institutions in the ongoing UN global investment in tradable carbon and reduction of negative climate externalities. Time is right to engage in pragmatic ecosystem restoration projects inside B at the World Campus and the large expanse of land donated to the university by Obadan community in the Model local government area, which is presently lying fallow. Conclusion. Nigeria's fragile rainforest and associated biodiversity has been intensively exploited for over a century, to the extent that it has become degraded, having dragged beyond the elastic limits, or what I refer to as the tipping point. The key drivers of forest degradation and ultimate loss include poor working plans, dearth of equipment, poor intersectoral cooperations and linkages, alienation of forest-dependent communities, extreme climate events and negative externalities, encroachment into forest reserves, deforestation, illegal and unsustainable logging, and farming, poaching of wildlife, oil prospecting, exploration and associated pollution, nomadic herding, which is the worst these days, and associated wildfires. Nigeria's 1990 constitution places under state jurisdiction, and 36 state governments have disparate, incoherent, and often conflicting policies. And Nigeria as a country has no national law. Rainforests provide timber and non-timber forest products, including the rainforest herb, Tamacocos, Daniela, a vital herb which boosts the income of the rural poor. The African mistotto and Okubaka of Breville are invaluable parasitic plants with multiple use values. My work pathways, shelter beds with indigenous tree, EBT, and elsewhere are vision. Acknowledgement. I wish to thank the Almighty God for the priceless gift of life, good health, and the grace to present this inaugural lecture. Indeed, this is the day to honor and glorify the Lord. I extend my deepest appreciation to the Vice Chancellor, Professor Doba Bright Amorigi, SAN, for the rare privilege of being the 352nd inaugural lecturer of this great university. To my treasured hub, Mrs. Philo, children, Onoma, Matthew Jr., Royal, and certainly ISIKHUEMEN. I thank you for your unwavering love, sacrifices, faith, and confidence in your dad. And my siblings, extended family, in-laws, and friends have equally been solid pillars of support along this not too smooth but interesting professional and academic mission. I recognize with gratitude the support and encouragement from mentors, supervisors, teachers, colleagues, friends, who in one way or the other shaped my academic and professional paths. First in the course civil service and thereafter in the agriculture. Special thanks to the Faculty of Agric and my departmental colleagues for the solidarity and cooperation we mutually shared over the years. And finally, to everyone here present today, to share in this momentous occasion, may God bless you richly and grant you journey mercies back to your home. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Please stand. Stand. To our lecture. Thank you very much. You may sit now. Thank you. May I now respectfully invite the representative of the Vice Chancellor to summarize the lecture.
That was a very brilliant delivery. Congratulations, our dear inaugural lecturer, Professor ISIKHUEMEN. The synopsis of the lecture. The rainforest is evergreen and high-growth foliage, rich in thick-stemmed woody lianas and other herbaceous life forms, such as vines and epiphytes. In Africa, the largest portion is in the Congo Basin. It extends westwards into Equatorial Guinea, the Gabon, and the Cameroons. And as a narrow strip, the rainforest continues still farther west, parallel to the coast of the Gulf of Guinea, through Nigeria and Ghana to Liberia and the Guinea. In Nigeria, the belt extends from the western to the eastern boundary, inclusive of the mangrove forest of the Niger Delta, reaching a maximum of 300 kilometers from the coast to somewhere near Sabogida in the northern fringe of Edo State. The rainforest in southern Nigeria has been continuously exploited for over a century and currently degraded, with a significant number of flora and fauna species endangered. The research works of the inaugural lecturer, Professor ISIKHUEMEN, covers seedling, as well as vegetation, ecosystem ecology, germination, seedling growth and establishment under in situ and ex situ conditions. The works highlight germination types, species guilds, pioneers, non-pioneer light demanders, and primary climate species and their peculiarities. Biodiversity inventory, including non-timber forest products and diagnostic assessments of regeneration, are underscored. medicinal plants and their importance and use in health security are also exemplified. The importance of two hemiparasites, Ukubaka obrevili and African mistoto, is given prominence in the study, while the introduction of wild indigenous trees in urban greening elucidated. The inaugural lecturer ongoing research investigations on Ukubaka obrevili is given prominence. The inaugural lecturer recommendations harp on the need for everyone to acquire the basic empirical and indigenous know-how on the ecological peculiarities of ecosystem and species. It knows Nigeria's lack of national forest law and the stand-alone and disparate forest policies in states. It beckons on all stakeholders to engage in hands-on restoration of ecosystem and rehabilitation of endangered flora, including NTFPAs, and enjoins academics to build bridges across knowledge domains to minimize cynicism and gaps that exist between science and local ecological knowledge. Finally, the inaugural lecturer cautions on the blanket use of indigenous wild trees for greening urban environments, including built-up areas, and strongly recommend rehabilitation ecologist guidance because of the ecological idiosyncrasies of wild tree species, root and crown architecture, gilt height, and seasonality. Once again, I want to congratulate the inaugural lecture for this lecture well delivered.
Thank you, sir. Please appreciate the acting Vice Chancellor more. Clap, 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 clap. Thank you. As we invite the lecturer to step forward to be decorated, and we invite the immediate family members. Madam and children, please step forward. Family, colleagues, friends have come from far and near to listen to this lecture and to honor the lecturer. Please join me to welcome the wife of the inaugural lecturer, Mrs. Philo ISIKHUEMEN. The children, Onome ISIKHUEMEN, Roy ISIKHUEMEN, and Colonel ISIKHUEMEN. We welcome specially all the way from Lagos, the MD CEO, Ment Oil and Gas Limited Lagos, Mr. Johnson Obo Peters. Please put your hands together. Join me also to welcome the former Deputy Speaker, Edo State House of Assembly, Right Honorable Festus Ebea. Welcome, sir. We welcome the MD of Bar Zoological Garden and Nature Park, Sir Andrew Ehanire. Please join me to welcome him. We welcome the MD Agua Global Service Abuja, Mr. Lucky Iberaisi. We welcome you, sir. We welcome Professor Emeritus T.O.K. Audu. We welcome Professor Emeritus U.J. Ikatwa. Daddies, we welcome you specially. We welcome the former DVC Ekawan Campus, Professor Joel Abolagba. We welcome former acting registrar of our university, Mr. Clarkson Hidiato. We also welcome very specially DVC says I should welcome my husband very well. So let me welcome again Sir Andrew Ehanire. Thank you for joining me to welcome him very well. And so I want to welcome my daddy, a very special welcome to the Oba Dolaye of Benin Kingdom and a senior citizen in Far Forestry, Chief Victor Osa Uzame. Daddy, welcome. Welcome former Executive Directors of NIFA, Dr. Celestine Ikwenobe and Dr. Charles ISIKHUEMEN. We welcome you. We welcome Mr. Roland Coleman all the way from the USA. Please clap for him, clap for him, clap for him. Thank you, sir, for coming. We welcome Alhaji Ibrahim Bala from Lagos. We welcome Mr. and Mrs. Raphael Zebakai. We welcome Dr. O.S. EKEOBA. We welcome former Directors of Forestry, Edo State, Mr. Innocent Azeke. We welcome Mr. Lawani Yaya. Put your hands together, please. We welcome Sir Veteran Tony Enilama. Welcome Professor Mrs. Rachel Egarela, Professor Mrs. Matilda Ifatwa. Welcome you, ma. Welcome Professor Bamikole. Welcome, sir. Welcome Professor David Okoedo Okoje. Welcome Professor John Egbedion. Welcome Professor Mrs. Margaret Koyenikon. Welcome Professor Timothy Aremu. Professor Friday Omoregbe. Welcome you. Welcome Professor Mrs. Flora Ehigiato. Welcome Professor Gideon Emelwe, who has been busy coordinating this whole ceremony. Please put your hands together for Professor Emelwe. We welcome Professor Agbansalo Osaibovo. We welcome Professor John Omoyaki. We welcome Professor Iyabode Wadweze. Welcome Professor Emwejoke Woko. We welcome Professor Henry Akinibosu. We welcome Professor Hakim Olaleko. We welcome other former Directors of Forestry, Edo State, Mr. Friday Oriaki and Mr. Sylvester Okwekere. We welcome the Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Environment, Edo State, Mr. Jude Eku. We welcome Director of Forest, Plantation and Extension Services, Edo State, Mr. Maxwell Akpele. We welcome Area Forest Officer Orion, Edo State, Mrs. Titi Lion Omoigui. We welcome the Area Forest Officer Esako, Mr. Friday Awele. We welcome a retired Agric Officer, Mr. Robert Eko. We welcome you all to the University of Benin as we are about rounding off this 352nd inaugural lecture. But before we go, let's take first the Uniben anthem in the third stanza of the national anthem, standing. Please stop serving. Halt temporarily, please. Standing as the Vice Chancellor's procession leaves the auditorium.